Mr. President, welcome to the program. You are here on your first UNGA. President Trump is also making his first address to the world. You have many areas of disagreement with the current president, amongst them the Iran nuclear deal, where you think that you should stay in it. President Trump has told the UN in his first global speech that this is the worst deal that he's ever seen in history, and that one way or another, the deal is an embarrassment to the United States, and I don't think you've heard the last of it, believe me. In a sign that he's preparing to weaken the deal, what do you take from that? Do you think he's going to pull out? You've spoken to him about it.
I hope no, and I think it would be a big mistake. I think if President, I don't say that this Iran deal, the nuclear deal with Iran, is the alpha and omega of everything about how to deal with Iran. If President Trump considers it's not sufficient, I do agree with that. We have this deal. I think that the outcome of this deal is that now we have a monitoring process with the international agency following the situation, and I think that it's better than nothing. Okay? Why? Because if we stop with this deal, if we just stop with the nuclear agreement, so we will enter into a situation very similar to the North Korean situation before what happened this summer. So I think it would be a big mistake. Now, this deal has to be completed. And probably I will try to convince President Trump that the best way to address his concerns regarding Iran is to work into that direction. First, we have to work in order to have a monitoring process on ballistic missiles and ballistic activity of Iran. That's a concern. That's a concern for the whole region. We have to work on it, and we need a new agreement. And we can work on sanctions and agreements on this ballistic side. And second, we have to complete the 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran for the period post-2025, because this agreement just covers till 2025 the situation.
But on balance, it makes the world a safer place to have this nuclear deal?
Definitely. You know, you have today some governments not compliant with international rules and trying to get nuclear weapons. That's it. Mm-hmm. That's the situation we have with North Korea, and that's the situation we have with some other countries.
Okay.
The more you contain the situation, the more you monitor, the more you put international agencies and you follow the situation very carefully, the more you can intervene and contain their influence. I want to follow this line. And I think if we just stop with the deal because it was a deal negotiated by President Obama, I mean, it's not a good reason to stop with the 2015 deal.
And what about President Trump at this moment of maximum global crisis over North Korea, calling him at the UN rocket man, talking about destroying, the capabilities, that very, very provocative language?
Look, I think what we have to do and what we need is to be efficient. I think that North Korean president is probably not very sensitive to what happened to the UN. He's not a great client of the city and the United Nations. The guy is in his own world. My point is not to increase pressure and words against words. What we have to do is to find the appropriate answer to decrease tension and protect people in the region, and I want to think of South Korean people living in a big anxiety. I want to think about the whole region and our Japanese friends, and I will see a Japanese Prime Minister during this trip in New York. And I think about the whole world, because we speak about a global threat today. So for me, it's how to decrease the tension, how to contain the North Korean situation, and how to increase the pressure to de-escalate.
Do you think there's a military solution? I mean, sometimes the president seems to indicate that there's a military solution to North Korea.
Look at the map. If you think there is a military solution, you speak about a lot of victims. I do believe in multilateralism because I do believe in negotiation. I do believe in how to control. I do believe in building peace. And I think that's exactly what we have to do in this region.
The president told the United Nations in his speech that he wants a tougher, better deal. He's very concerned also about North Korea. I spoke to the Iranian president who says the US will pay if they pull out of this deal. What is your view on that, and what have you said to Mr. Trump? Because I know you discussed it last night.
Sure, and I discussed successively with President Trump and President Rouhani about this issue. First of all, our main anxiety today regarding nuclear weapon is about North Korea. And this situation is to be handled very carefully. We have to avoid military answer. We have to increase pressure on North Korea, especially coming from China and Russia, because North Korea is very dependent from these two countries. And we have to decrease the pressure and stabilize the situation. But North Korea is a very good illustration of a what-if scenario for nuclear deal with Iran. Why? Because we stopped everything with North Korea years and years ago. We stopped any monitoring, any discussions with them. And what's the result? They will probably get nuclear weapon. So my position for Iran vis-à-vis President Trump was to say, look at the situation on North Korea. I don't want to replicate the situation with Iran.
Let me ask you about how you deal with President Trump, because he says some things in person, he says some things on Twitter, his ministers say other things. How do you deal with the leader of the free world in this kind of situation? Some have described it as kind of chaotic. Some say they don't quite know who to listen to. What does President Macron use to deal with the President of the United States?
I have very direct discussions with President Trump. I do appreciate him. We have a very good personal relationship, and I have very direct discussion with him. I don't interfere in domestic policies and what you describe as interferences or discrepancies between different members. For me, there is one voice. You're president, you're elected, you're president, and this is the voice I consider and the man I speak with. And it's always the same thing. We share our views. He's very direct, and I think he'll listen to what I propose.
What are the main areas of disagreement right now?
I think the very first disagreement is very well known, is about climate. As President Trump decided to leave Paris Agreement, I mean, that's his choice, and I do respect his choice, and he was elected on the basis of such a decision. But I do regret this decision, and I do want to convince him to come back to this agreement, because for me, that's the core agreement for climate. And I do believe that, especially after these hurricanes we just had, both in the US and in France, we do see the direct consequences of CO2 emissions and all this climate change. We have to fight against this climate change, and we need a global mobilization for that. So we have a disagreement on this issue, but I will keep pushing. We have direct discussion yesterday. We will implement Paris Agreement on our own, at the French level, but the European level as well. We have a strong agreement with the Chinese and the other powers, and I think it's very important to preserve this multilateral approach. And now that's an issue for the US itself, to see what they want to do and what President Trump wants to do with climate. But we have to deal with that.
The president says this is a bad deal, we can get a better deal, it's bad for the economy, it's bad for the climate, it's bad for the United States. What do you say when he says that to you?
I mean, first of all, it's not bad for the climate and environment, definitely. And especially if he decides to leave, it will be worse, because the US is a very great contributor in terms of CO2 emission. So that's an issue. And if you don't fix the situation in the US, you are not credible to tell the others what they have to do. And you have direct consequences of the situation. So no, this agreement is not bad for climate, it's wrong. Even the short, mid and long run, that's a good agreement for the US and for all of us. Why? Because it's true that in order to deal with climate change, you will have to change a lot of things in our economies. I mean, you will have to stop certain activities regarding fossil fuels, regarding classical industrial activities, because we know that they pollute a lot, but you will create new jobs to reduce emissions. It means more innovation, more jobs in cleaner sectors.
Which brings me then to the very major philosophical point that you're making, which is continue the historical relationship, continue multilateralism, be really part of the world. You know, President Trump has said, "Make America great again." He sort of kind of shifts between being part of the world and being, you know, protectionist and isolationist. What gave you the courage to go against that trend during your election campaign? I remember before the election you said this is a great moment for France to go in the opposite direction of the prevailing trends. You know, take on anti-globalization, take on populism. What made you do that and believe that you could win doing that?
Because I know the outcome of this trend. It's war. I do know the outcome of this trend. Nationalism is all about war. We experienced that 80 years ago in Europe. So at the end of the day, if you believe that there is nothing to change this trend, and we have to accept anti-globalization, anti-multilateralism, pro-nationalism, protectionism, and so on, it's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about how to fight against each other, and it's all about war.